Hey guys, so sometimes banishing the damn tech gremlins can take a hot.
It's the body
minute.
gremlins tonight for me. It's this.
Well, and they decided to strike your pen of all things, like the most basic tech that you could possibly. You have to go get a goddamn
fucking
pencil.
Shoulder, like man.
Okay, press F to pay respects for our monetization. We swore in the first 30 seconds of the stream. We're screwed. Hi guys, welcome back. This is actually Jen's topic, but we both have a crap load of experience because Jen is from, as she put it, the testing ground for this BS, and I'm from
the grandmother of gentrification.
Yep. And I am from currently experiencing what several different websites and like news organizations have reported is the most volatile housing market currently in the country. There are bidding wars going on in my area where houses are selling for upwards of $300,000 to $500,000 above their asking price, which is absolutely batshit nuts. Akeda says, FYI, Jesus, that's an F-bomb for you, it looks like. Count for the American Focus Coalition was 293, 125 for the Unicorn Hunter video.
Damn. Akeda, what color? I need a piece of paper.
Apparently, Akeda's been doing F-bomb counting.
Awesome, thank you. What color, Akeda?
Yeah, so reminder to everybody who's new to the stream. Apologies, by the way, for the audio quality. It is over 100 degrees out here right now in Washington. I have to be in my room with the fan on. I hope the background noise isn't too loud, but like I literally cannot be in my office. It is too hot. It is over 90 degrees in my house. I have had symptoms of heat exhaustion twice. I'm trying to keep hydrated, but like right now sitting in this fan, like with my whole ass in this fan is what is currently keeping me functional. So apologies that my audio quality is not up to snuff. I gotta be where I'm at. So we have Akeda says red. So for those of you who are new to the show or haven't been around for a while, anybody who is who donates $5 or more through Super Chat gets to pick a color. That color will last for 5 minutes, and then we switch to the next one. So don't feel any pressure. We do it every week, or at least every week that we actually do a show. Last week, those of you who are in the Discord know that there was a sort of big revelation in the community that kind of both of us had to go and process a little bit. So we ended up missing last week, but we're back.
Thank you, Carbuckle. What color would you like?
Carbuckle says apartment building going crazy here in North Carolina too. Can't wait to can't hear the fan at all. Well, that's good. I'm glad that some of you guys can't hear it. I can hear it a little bit when I put the echo on my headphones. There's not a lot I can do about it. If you can hear it, my apologies. It is so hot. Carbuckle says orange.
I got orange.
So, Jen, let's talk a little bit about the housing market because, as everybody knows, lots of places are starting to open up as of June 30th. Akeda wants red again. We are all your fans.
Thank
but
you,
tis. But housing market's starting to open back up. Now, I think here, Jay Inslee, our governor, actually just put a thing out so that if there is not any sort of rental assistance or like program involved for another 2 months after that, you can't get evicted after June 30th.
Yeah, they don't give a fuck down here. They're like, get the fuck out.
Yeah. Landlords are practically rioting, which, you know, they can like, you know, watch me shed a tear for the billionaires.
Get the fuck out.
Can't even
They're
understand.
like, yo, June 31st, y'all gotta fucking go. Peach, I'm down south. I'm down south in Tennessee. Emerald Green.
Yeah, we got Kentucky Heathen says Emerald Green. Thank you so much.
My best Kentucky Heathen to get as close to Emerald Green as I can.
All right, so I am starting the clock now, even though Akeda's had a little bit. You know, I usually start it when we start the topic, or at least 5 minutes in. That way we can have enough slots. Tonight's show's probably going to be at max an hour and a half, so do you want to say...
I still got to record a video, so...
Yeah, so what? Do you want to say 15 slots tonight?
Sounds good.
Yeah, let's do 15 slots tonight. All right, so this is the first slot starting. Akeda, you got a little bit of extra time on your red, but you're also the channel sugar daddy, so, you know.
Give me that sugar.
Oh, my God. We're not going there yet, okay? We got to at least wait 20 minutes for Rammery Land so people doesn't, like, damn me.
No. Fuck that.
All right. Oh, freaking anybody who's got the boob train emotes, now's the time. Anyway, so let's
It's a good shirt for it, isn't it?
It is. It is absolutely. It is very hard not to notice your assets at present.
This is a good shirt
which
for it.
We're about to talk about assets. So let's go all the way the fuck back to the bane of millennials' existence, because I mean the housing market was volatile prior to 2008
to a big extent. Later Gen X too.
Yeah, like so a lot of millennials, like the middle millennials, like me, were born into and graduated into the worst job market on the planet.
Right.
And the
housing
reason for
markets,
that,
job markets, right.
So let's talk a little bit about that history, and then we can talk about the ways in which companies and individuals have been avoiding Dodd-Frank, because, you know, let's talk a little bit about that. So 2008, going all the way back in time, we've got the rise of various kinds of, like, especially mumble rap was starting to get big there. Lots of us were graduating high school. Housing market crash.
I was a full-grown ass adult at that point. Who fucking hated mumble rap?
But you're about as old as you can get and still be a millennial.
I think I'm the last. What do they call my end is Zennials?
Yeah, they say that you're like they say there's like this micro generation from like 1980 to 1985.
Right. And well, no, 1980 to 1984, I think, or 79 to 84 is what it is. 79 to 84.
A combination of boomers and Gen Xers are actually to blame for this. There's a lot of shit going on. So let's talk about the history.
Hold on. Wait, let me clear that up. It's a combination of, yes, the boomer generation, but the very early Gen X generation. Mm-hmm. And I want to spin this on y'all. I am late. It's depending on who you hit up. I'm either very late Gen X or I'm very early millennial, which is why they call my group Zennials. For us, it was a little different. We were coming up as teenagers when things were still promising. You know, the job market was halfway decent. We weren't locked into a now 20-year war. None of this shit had happened. So 9/11 happened. We were all in college. We were about 18 to 22, I would say.
Versus on my end, I was 10 when 9/11
right.
happened.
We were anywhere between the ages of 17, 18 to 21, 22. Excuse me. Allergies are fucking up my throat.
Kentucky, if you were born in 01, then you count as a Gen Z. Gen Z started at the millennium.
Right. So here we go through our fucking teenage years, right? And I'm explaining to y'all why early millennials and late Gen Xers are so angry versus the later millennials just like, whatever, this is just life. So we come in through these teenage years, right? Where like everything's fucking good and everything's still promised to us. You can still walk into a fucking store and fill out an application and shit, right? You can still
still go physical places to hang out. The internet hadn't taken over.
Right, yeah, the internet hadn't taken over at all. Excuse me. We, the dream of still buying a house, having a family, we still knew at that point that we had to have a 2-income household, but it wasn't as hard. So here we are, we're all going off to fucking college and shit, right? And you're all fucking bright-eyed and promising and shit. And then the fucking 9/11 happened. So it's oh shit. Like, oh shit. Now we came from
Moto Kanoto, you were a later millennial. So
you're a much later millennial.
Yeah, you're very close to the cusp between Gen Z and millennials, because Gen Z is usually defined at starting at 2000. That's the generation that grew up never knowing a life without the internet.
Right. So this shit happens, right? And that shook us to our fucking core, because like we had lived through the longest period of peace in American history. So that fucking comes.
Daniel, we need to know what color you want.
So that fucked us up, right? And then we're like, okay, we're all fucking optimistic. We're the fucking generation that is gonna lead out of terror and get our fucking country back to peace, because we're the fucking adults now and somebody fucking left us in charge of a whole bunch of shit. And then the .com bubble hit.
Oh, dang!
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you so much, David Lester. I've only lived in places that go 95 to 110. I feel your pain. I wonder if perhaps we're headed for another crash a la 2008. Also, hot pink if we're still doing colors. We are. Speaking of which, that is our first switch of the night.
So, I think that's orange. Vermilion. That looks orange. Fuck it.
All right.
Does that look orange?
That does look orange. If the person who requested it does not feel it's orange enough, we can change it.
Yeah, let me know. So now we're like, okay, we're gonna fucking save the country because we're the fucking adults and this shit is on us. And we were fucking bright-eyed, fucking young fucking adults, right? Don't fucking know about it. .com bubble hits, the housing bubble hits, and then everything went to shit. We can't fucking afford a house. We can't afford a fucking apartment. All our fucking credit scores mean everything.
Daniel requests purple for
I got
so
that
one before.
Meanwhile, we weren't taught about credit scores and shit because it wasn't such a big deal when we were coming up. So we went out and they, you know, all our parents were in that fucking Gen Z boomer fucking generation, and they're like, you need credit, get a credit card, get a credit card. We're maxing out these fucking credit cards, a fucking credit shit. This is when colleges really started to start charging, so that's fucking our credit up. So where younger millennials were born into this and came into this and this is what they expected their world to be, my end, that shit got taken from us. That shit was taken from us. They were like, yo, we literally worked our entire fucking lives for this because it was still fucking possible. Y'all left us with fucking nothing. So what the fuck did we work so hard for shit that is no longer applicable, that you fucked up? Well, this is why older millennials are so fucking angry and fucking bitter. This is why.
Well, and to be fair, like, to contrast that a little bit, as a younger millennial, you know, 91 high, just turned 30 on the 6th. So we actually didn't really expect that. We expected to be in the war and all that shit, but we got blindsided by the '08 crash. Like, we were as shocked as everyone else was.
So were we.
But a lot of us graduated into that. So, like, our first attempts at getting jobs were happening when we were competing with people 5 times our age and y'all. So, like, there was a lot of bitterness from us as well because, like, we didn't even get that chance to work 2 jobs and go through college. Like, a lot of us had to fight our asses off to even get entry-level shit because this is when the entry-level needs 5 years experience things started hitting the job market.
But look at this too. It's like, you know, we got all this fucking promise and shit. And like I said, we were 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. Now all of our friends are dying. So on top of our fucking jobs are gone, our fucking being lied to that we could buy a fucking house and have a family is fucking gone. If, you know, your fucking partner doesn't join the fucking military and doesn't die kind of shit, they can maybe come home if they joined the fucking army, which everybody did, because, you know, it was our fucking patriotic duty. If they didn't come home fucked up from the army, right? So we got 2 years of a fucking war in Afghanistan they didn't know how to fight. We got boys dying there. And then 2 years later, we get lied to about another fucking war that even more of our friends are fucking thrown into. So our friends are dying. We're fucking broke. Everything we were taught our entire fucking lives is no longer fucking true. They fucking knew this shit would happen. And then when it came down to the too big to fail banks, we're sitting here like, yeah, but we were taught and we lived in the society that we were fucking taken care of. So how come y'all ain't taking care of us? You're busting out the banks. These were my early adult years. Literally, my friends were dying. If my friends didn't die in fucking 9/11, they continue to die 20 years later because I still have a lot of friends in the military. I got the prison industrial complex fucking ramped up because, you know, it became, this is late stage capitalism. So the prison industrial complex ramped up. People were getting forced out of their fucking homes because of the topic that we're going to be discussing here, or their fucking rents jumped so high that they had to turn to other means that were illegal just to pay their fucking rent and feed their fucking kids. So we're fucking pissed off. Our friends are either dying, they're going into jail, or they're fucking homeless and they're fucking broke. Everything we've been fucking taught that we can do, none of it is fucking possible. And then when it came down to us being adults, at least the younger millennial generation kind of saw what the fuck we were going through as adults, and y'all were like, okay, this is how the world is. We literally got looked at, well, you know, too bad, so sad. Meanwhile, we were dead in the middle of fucking working towards the shit that they fucking taught us we needed to work for. So we in turn turned around to the younger millennials and was like, y'all, this shit is a fucking lie. This shit is a fucking lie. Don't look forward to it. We got left holding the bag and was like, oh, too bad, so fucking sad.
Well, and all of us have been blamed for, quote unquote, being lazy and all kinds of other shit because we've been having to compete with our parents our whole lives.
Right, and then I hear, you know, they talk about millennials like we're 16, and it's like, no, the oldest millennials at this point are in their early 40s.
Well, like they're ranging from 40. 20s and
yeah,
early,
40
like,
to 20, 27, I want to say. We range in age from anywhere from 43 to 27 at this point. We're not, excuse me, these young kids. We have kids at this point that are adults in the fucking out in the world at this point.
Well, and you know what? We should do a stream about, like, the markers of adulthood that we a lot of us missed because a large percentage
Y'all, that's
of our
a show
generation,
I could do all on my goddamn own. Fuck.
Yeah, like that's something that I think both of us like. If you guys want a whinge session, let us know in the comments. Not just the live chat, but let us know in the comments after the show if that's something you guys want us to talk about the markers of adulthood and the blame and all that and the war between the generations. Because the reason we just set that stage is what did we graduate into and what were y'all sitting in college with? What happened was, let's talk a little bit about why Dodd-Frank became a thing. So, Dodd-Frank is a bunch of financial regulations that got passed in the mid-2000s, or like just before the 2010s. That was part of the bank bailouts. They passed this alongside the bank bailouts.
Let's explain the bank bailout first. So, the bank bailout...
What did they do to fuck up to need bailing out? Let's talk about that.
Hold on.
Basically, they created a bunch of complex, what we will call... We'll call them financial products, even though what they were basically... mortgages. Pseudo pyramid schemes.
They were mortgages. The big thing was mortgages.
They were mortgage packages, basically. Right. What they would do is they'd take a bunch of subprime mortgages, which the word subprime here, what that means... What's a subprime mortgage? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. So what a subprime mortgage is, they lent money to somebody they ain't got nobody business like lending money to, basically. These are mortgages usually that have adjustable rates because like if you have a fixed rate mortgage like what I have for my house, they can't change your rate except for if the prime rate of the government goes up and then it'll go up. But other than that, like my 2.75% that I got on my mortgage, it don't change. Nothing fucking happens to it.
Yeah, and usually mortgages can go anywhere from 20 to 30 years. So for 20 to 30 years, and the interest rates aren't that bad. You can go anywhere from like a 2.5 to like a 5% mortgage rate. And it stays there.
Usually you want to be closer to where I am than the 3 to 5% because that's when shit gets expensive. But
but you stay there. But you stay there the entire term of your fucking mortgage. Until it's paid off.
Versus an adjustable rate mortgage, which is what a lot of these were sold back then. They still exist. They're a very bad idea. Do not sign up for one ever. If you get offered one, run for the fucking hills.
What a subprime mortgage is people who didn't have good credit, people who had kind of decent income but not the best credit, people
or not even decent income. They gave these to everybody.
They just gave these fucking mortgages to everybody, regardless of whether or not they could afford to pay it. So they slapped them with this adjustable rate mortgage, right? And
they do the thing that you see with like credit cards where they'll be like, oh, 0% for your first year or whatever. But then
they can sit and fuck with it however the fuck they want to. So what happened was they start loading out these fucking mortgages, right? And then 9/11 happens and the fucking stock market took a tank. The stock market fucking tanked for it. So what they do is they base the mortgage rate on the market. If the market is dropping, your interest rate is going to go up. If the market is stable, your interest rate is going to stay a little lower. So we had a series of years where 9/11 happened. People were unemployment was starting to hit peaks. Stock market wasn't doing all that great. So these adjustable rate mortgages started going up and up and up and up. And people were defaulting on these mortgages in mass fucking quantities because they couldn't afford to pay these anymore. And banks were losing money. Now, when the banks started losing money, the fucking stock market started destabilizing. So up went these fucking interest rates again. And they were just foreclosing on millions and millions and millions and millions of properties, leading people to be homeless. So now we have a surge in homelessness. We have no fucking jobs. We have people with terrible fucking mortgages on their credit, which are now foreclosed on.
You skipped a really important middle ground here, though, because this isn't just the stock market. They created an entire pseudo stock market out of these subprime mortgages. So what happened was
what had happened was the stock market became dependent on the banks, and the banks became dependent on who could pay these mortgages and how much money they had coming in every month from people paying their mortgages. So this was all tied in together.
Well, and it wasn't even just that. Let's talk a little bit about the financial products that these banks came up with, because this is part of where investor money got really, really tanked, and part of why the stock market went with it. Normally, the stock market and the housing market are not that dependent on each other. Like, mostly the stock market affects the rich
and
people's retirements. But
they never used to be.
During this period of time, they sort of enabled a lot of bullshit, because what they did was they created these what appeared to be very safe investments. They would package a bunch of mortgages together. Usually they'd have A grade mortgages, S grade mortgages, and then you'd have some of these subprimes. And they package these guys together and they would have people buy what was the equivalent of a stock, but not. They would have people buy a share or the full package of these things on the belief, like they'd pay a percentage of what that was worth for the partial ownership of these loans. And as long as people were making payments, they would get paid back. And this is why I compared it to a pyramid scheme. So this is why I compared it to a pyramid
scheme. Right, but what another part you're missing is, though, when it came with these packages, a lot of the times what they were doing them was selling them to other banks to try to stabilize their market. They were just trading them between banks. And then on top of selling these credits to other banks, they would sell off these foreclosed mortgages to predatory lending, what's the word I'm looking for? Debt collection companies too.
Yep. And those debt
so they're making double dollar on shit that ain't getting paid.
Well, and so a lot of this money was imaginary because, of course, the majority of these people are never going to be able to afford the payments, even if the loans were low. Like, we're talking people that were getting lent out. Normally, if you get a mortgage, most banks that are on the more conservative end will not lend you a mortgage that is more than a third per month of the monthly payment that has been estimated of your monthly income. Right. If you exceed that, generally they will not lend to you. Like, again, we're talking about the more conservative banks. There are some predatory banks that will, but the vast majority of banks, if you are making less than 150% of whatever amount you're going to be paying, or less than 200% of whatever amount you're supposed to be paying, they will not lend to you. These guys would lend to literally anybody. So these are people who would be paying half or more of their incomes, maybe even their full income, supposedly per month, if they could make these payments. They start defaulting. These investors and banks start losing money because this money never existed to begin with. Now, all of a sudden, people are getting foreclosed on. There are tons of empty houses, which, of course, anybody who's ever lived in a neighborhood where a bunch of foreclosures happen, if you own a house, you'll see property values drop, which means that the seller's market gets fucked.
But there's also a bit of a precursor to this, too, and that was the Glass-Steagall Act. The Glass-Steagall Act was an act created in 1933 that made banks choose whether they would be a commercial bank or an investment bank. They had to choose.
And the repeal of Glass-Steagall enabled
this. Glass-Steagall was repealed in 1999. They still now Glass-Steagall is what created the FDIC, which is where if your bank goes bust, your money is insured by. But with the repeal of Glass-Steagall, these banks were now able to do both. They were able to be a commercial and an investment bank. So what does that mean? That means that you go to a commercial bank to get your mortgage, right? You fucking default on your mortgage. What they do is they put this package together and then move that to the investment end and bounce their money around that way. So it looks like the bank is doing well when in fact it's still not getting money. They would just bounce these mortgage packages, these grade S, grade A's, whatever, between the commercial and investment sections of their bank. So it looked like, hey, we're selling off, we're moving money, but there was no money being moved. So while it wasn't illegal, it was mad fucking shady. Because technically they were just moving paperwork. So it wasn't like they were defaulting or defrauding anything. But it still gave the illusion to the market that these banks were being successful. It was a sale on record. It looked like something on paper. And people were banking the market off of, hey, look how good these banks are doing with these mortgages and the mortgages that are foreclosing. They're moving them around. That was made possible when Glass-Steagall was repealed in 1999. So even before any of this happened, that laid the way. That laid the way for this to happen.
So then what happens? Now you've got mass foreclosures. You've got a lot of empty houses. So you're going into the 2010s. Now, what ends up happening is you get the tech revolution of the 2010s. This is when Uber comes up. This is when Lyft comes up. This is when smartphones and apps are
there was
bigger.
A big banking surge right around that time, too.
Yep, because banks got a bunch of bailouts. Most of them never paid it back.
Right. So, yeah, they got a bunch of bailouts in 2008. Now, why did they get the bailouts? So this is what Too Big to Fail, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, this is what this shit is. These were major fucking banks that were tied to the market. They were tied to student loans. They were tied to a lot of shit that regulated the worldwide market. Our stock market, our financial market controls what the rest of the world does. If our shit crashes, other shit in the world's going to crash. And there will literally be a worldwide fucking crash. Worldwide banking crisis, fucking everybody's broke. So you had Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, who were the two biggest fucking banks that we have running. They were tied, like I said, student loans, mortgages, a whole bunch of shit. And they turned around and said, well, because these fucking mortgages can't be paid, we're fucking broke and our bank is going to go broke and we're going to fail. So the government looked at it and said, what would happen if the two biggest banks in America failed? They figured out that our stock market would crash. When our market would crash, that means the Asian market would crash, the European market would crash. And if we allowed these two banks to go completely fucking bankrupt, it would literally crash the worldwide economy into a period of poverty worldwide that we had never seen before. So what the government decided to do, instead of paying people who they had 401ks, they had, whatever the fuck, they had all these fucking investments accounts in these banks, and when these banks couldn't pay these out, these people lost their fucking money. So instead of the government giving money to the people that lost this money, they gave it to these quote unquote too big to fail banks. These too big to fail banks were supposed to put the money back into their bank, put the money back into these accounts. This is what should have been done. It wasn't. They paid their CEOs big ass fucking bonuses and pretty much just hoarded the fucking money.
Okay,
and
so
this generally was the beginning of the end of any kind of financial stability in the United States.
Irish Sweden, I know that Fannie and Freddie aren't investment firms. They're basically loan companies for.
Right. No, I'm saying this. I know that they're not investment firms. I'm explaining what the too big to fail was. This is where the big chunk of where we lost financial stability in the United States was. This plays a big part. I'm not saying that they're not. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were banks. That's why they called them the too big to fail banks. After this, they became insurance companies. However, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, way back in the fucking day, this was the most major provider of student loans back in my day, was Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Fannie Mae was the big one.
But let's go back to the early 2000s. We get to the tech boom. Now, part of the reason why we need to talk about the tech boom is because this is where the second round of housing collapse, as it began to recover,
also real quick,
started.
Fannie Mae still giving mortgages. Fannie Mae is one of the biggest mortgage the biggest mortgage producers.
Carbuckle is correcting you that Sallie Mae was student loans.
That's right. I'm sorry. You're right. Sallie Mae was student loans. Fannie Mae was the mortgage companies, and Fannie Mae
and Freddie Mac were the mortgage companies that would
supposedly
back. They would supposedly back bad mortgages too. They were supposed to bail you out if you're as the bank. They used to give they gave guarantees that if a bank lent to a bad person potentially that defaulted, they would pay back that.
And Fannie Mae fucking went broke. They went broke. Fannie Mae is also one of the largest fucking financial firms in the country.
So let's go to the 2010s, because again, we got to get through a lot of history in order to get to the point where we can talk about now, because what's going on now is just a continuation of all of the things that have been laid down over the past 20, 30 years. So you get the tech boom, and you get something you all are probably very, very familiar with at this point. Anybody who's ever gone looking for a hotel knows how expensive hotels are. Then you have the alternative. If you're traveling, how many of you guys have gone on an app and, let's see, say checked out a room in somebody else's house and stayed there instead of going to an actual insured hotel where there's regulations and such? How many of you guys have actually used those particular app-based services?
Airbnb, VBRO.
Airbnb was the first, though, I think.
There's another one that I can't remember. Home something that I can't remember now.
But the point is how many of you guys have ever rented an Airbnb or what? And pick another app. There's a few of them now.
Yeah, I have.
And the thing is, what people figured out very quickly with these is that, okay, it's great. You've got an extra room in your house. You can let travelers stay there, maybe even room and board, whatever. That's great for the little guy. That sounds great in practice. Until you start realizing that building owners can take advantage of that too. And what you ended up happening as time went on, especially because there were no regulations around the tech sector at the time with this, they're starting to crack down on that in some cities, and there's a lot of resistance to this.
New York was the first one. There's actually rules in New York that you're not allowed to rent a place for under 30 days. There's and this shit has been on the books, but people were... So with Airbnb,
because you weren't officially renting, it wasn't considered a rental contract,
right? But with so for any of y'all who have rented a hotel room before, right? Have y'all seen the fucking taxes and shit? on your bill when you go to check out? Y'all seen that shit? Like, legit. You're like, oh, this room is $60 a night, but when it comes down to the taxes and fees at the end, you're paying 80 flat. What New York City got pissed about, excuse me, and that went to the city. That tax goes to, they have like hotel taxes and shit for each city. Excuse me.
I think we're getting short on colors.
We are. We've got one space left. If anybody wants to toss another one, we've got a couple of spots left open. So, what New York City got pissed about was that people started doing these Airbnbs, right? And the way that they would skirt it is Airbnbs were considered a rental. That's what they called them. They called them rentals because they couldn't turn around and call themselves hotels because they weren't providing the hotel's taxes and fees and the hotel.
There are also insurance certifications, all kinds of things you need if you want to be a hotel owner.
Right. So New York City got pissed that they weren't collecting the hotel taxes and started cracking down on it. And that shit'll fucking kill you. Quick.
Gata says, quick, red.
That shit'll kill you, right?
Thank you, Gata.
So the way that they've now skirted around this is if the homeowner is in the place with you and you're renting a room, it's fine. But you cannot rent an entire place to yourself.
And let's talk about why that is. Because what started to happen...
Hotel taxes!
Not just that, but what started to happen, let's talk about what Airbnb did to the housing market. What happened was, especially in very poor areas, and especially people, areas that were kind of on the border between, let's face it, the quote-unquote bad part of town, the part of town where most people don't want to live and that they have to, and, the touristy areas, slumlords would convert their buildings, and so would condos. Apartment owners and slumlords and landlords started converting entire buildings into mass rental units for Airbnbs. Or they started converting any rental unit where somebody left, they just did not put it back on the market and they would put it on as an Airbnb.
But this spun into now what we're talking about now. So I know everyone has looked at, I'm talking back in the day, had looked at LA, had looked at New York and was like, y'all remember how all of a sudden the fucking housing prices in those two cities just fucking skyrocketed? Out of fucking nowhere, all of a sudden it just got mad fucking expensive. There was no gradual. It was just oh shit, can't afford to live here no more. So this is the first step in what's known as gentrification. Now, if any of you don't know what gentrification is, it's basically what I call whitewashing an area. They take out the locals, they pretty much strip and devoid any kind of culture from the area to make it more bland so that it fits everybody.
And this is not always a completely conscious process. What'll often happen is that,
it's conscious.
It's
absolutely conscious. It is absolutely conscious.
In not every area does the process start in as consciously. What'll often happen is that one or two richer people will move into an area and then they'll start complaining to city authorities. And
no. It's bigger than that. And because I've actually had people that worked in this process. I know a lot of brokers. I know a lot of stockbrokers. I know a lot of real estate brokers that have actually worked in this process. So what happens is the city will meet up with banks. They'll meet up with tourist companies, whatever. And they'll say, hey, this area could make a lot of money. However, these areas are problems. They link up with corporations. And what a city will do is say, hey, if you move your company here, we'll give you tax incentives, we'll give you prime space, we'll give you all this shit.
Which is something that this is something that actually happened with Boeing a few years back.
Right.
Boeing talked about their contract was up with the 777 for the 777X, and so there was this massive, nationwide bidding war about which city was going to get
Boeing. Right.
Yeah.
So they'll come to these corporations, and it started with banks. Banks had the money, especially after the bailout. Granted, this started happening in New York way before, but New York was always kind of the financial center, so it made more sense that this is where they would start it. So they'll come to these banks and say, hey, if you put your headquarters here, we'll give you this incentive, that incentive, this incentive. But no multi-billion-dollar company is gonna want to fucking move to the hood. You know what I mean? Nobody's going to want to live around the projects. Nobody's going to live in the fucking hood. Nobody wants a fucking crackhead sitting in the front of their fucking office building. So what they do is they need to make these spaces more attractive to these billion-dollar corporations. So how do they do that? This mainly started with Donald Trump and many larger investment firms in New York City, to where they'll buy vacant buildings. They will resort to horrific fucking tactics, because when you buy a building that has tenants, under the law, you cannot evict those tenants until the end of that lease. I think this is called smitten. That's not what I'm looking for. This is what I'm looking for. They'll go through horrible fucking lengths to get rid of these tenants. So they'll buy up this building and they'll renovate it. Doesn't sound like a bad idea, right? Now, what wound up happening in New York and Chicago is that they actually would go through the city housing projects and buy these projects from the city, tear them down and renovate them, whatever the case may be, and then sell them. They said, well, we put this much money into it, we're not going to sell them or rent them as high luxury condos. Okay, so maybe, start working a few more jobs, you could afford this shit, right? Wrong. What they wind up doing is they wind up selling a lot of these units, a lot of these houses, to other corporations or overseas investors that aren't living in these apartments. They're just sitting here parked, empty. So what that does is it drives the demand for housing up, because there's no longer vacant properties available. So it drives this demand up when there's empty fucking houses sitting there, which in turn says, well, now we can charge more for it. This is how we wound up in the housing crisis. It started in New York City, it started in LA, and it worked its way in. What they found was that it wasn't private landlords that were buying up building after building after building after building and just kind of, making passive income from that. They found large scale corporations buying up entire fucking cities. I remember
out here, there's at least 2 different Chinese investment firms that have been doing this, because they're often overseas. Like, a lot of these are overseas companies. Out over here, there's at least 2 different Chinese investment firms that own something like a quarter of all the properties in the greater Seattle area. Like, there have been news articles and shit on this, which is absolutely horrifying. I actually know a handyman in my neighborhood who gets paid by them to maintain these empty buildings. They don't even bother renting them out.
No, they don't rent them out. Or if they do rent them out,
sometimes they'll renovate them and turn them into McMansions, and then they'll just fucking sit there.
Right. Who they do rent them out to is they'll find a lot of the times it goes to Arabic high-ranking families, Asian high-ranking families that just want the kind of cred of saying, I have a place in New York, I have a place in LA, I have a place in Seattle, and they just don't live there. Now, in turn, what this does, and I remember they did this when they did this in Brooklyn, they took all the projects out by Coney Island, fucking kicked everyone out. Now, mind you, this was right before Hurricane Sandy. They took everybody in these projects, and this was 24 buildings, 26 buildings, if not more, 30, that went as high as 12, 13, 14 stories and 4 apartments to each floor. So we're talking thousands and thousands of people. They said that we're going to shut down this housing project. We're going to move you into other housing projects in the city, which is now leading to fucking overcrowding and in subpar fucking conditions. They sold these buildings to, I can't remember which investment firm it was, but they sold these buildings into investment firms, and they started tearing them down, renovating them into high luxury condos, and then never filled them. So you've got thousands of units just sitting there, just fucking sitting there. And now, because they're building these high-rise condos, this neighborhood looks appealing. So they start building around this neighborhood. They built the Barclay Center. They started redoing Coney Island. They started redoing the boardwalk. And then fucking Sandy came along and fucked that up, but whatever. They started redoing all this. So now this neighborhood looks prized. Look at this up and coming fucking neighborhood. Look at all this pretty shit that's happening here. And they don't do this shit in middle class white fucking neighborhoods. They take the buildings in the fucking hood, because they're already getting money out of the fucking rich white neighborhood. They're already getting money out of the Upper East Side. They're getting money out of the Upper West Side. They don't need to do this here. They go into the hood, they go into the fucking projects, and they start fucking pushing people out. And I remember what was so fucked up about New York City when Sandy hit. Sandy fucking took out the Rockaways. Took it the fuck out. There was like nothing there. People were waiting 2 weeks to be rescued from flooding and no fucking power. And what did they do? Instead of the city turning around and saying, okay, we're going to rebuild the projects, They said that it was a complete loss, moved these people wherever or kicked them out, and then sold the land to overseas investors who are now building high-end fucking condos. So it's pushing working families out. It's pushing low-income families out onto the street because they can't afford what's being built there. They can, and if they had a house there, they can't afford the fucking property tax now because all this shit's being built up around it. So now, you know, the fucking property taxes are going up. They can't pay their fucking property tax. They're fucking out on the street. It's either they pay their mortgage or pay their property tax. Either way, they're getting thrown the fuck out. And then moves in either vacant houses or fucking little Columbus syndrome bitches from fucking Oklahoma that move into New York and are like, oh my God, I discovered a fucking chopped cheese sandwich in Harlem, so I'm going to move all me and my friends up here, and now we're going to push all these families out. And instead of charging $3 for a chopped cheese sandwich, you got to pay $8.50 for that shit. This is the shit that's happening. This is the shit that's been happening everywhere. And it started with these corporations buying up fucking property, buying properties from the fucking city, pushing low-income families out, and then leaving these fucking places vacant. Sorry.
Well, and this is where we start to come to some of the things that are still going on in the modern day, because what's often happening is, let's flash all the way forward, you now have Airbnbs freaking everywhere. The majority of them are not your mom and pa's.
Exactly. That shit. What happened was New York City started seeing Airbnb. Airbnb got real fucking big in New York City, right? So what happened was a lot of the time it became people who were being... Airbnb started in New York City by people who couldn't afford their rent anymore because this shit was happening, right? So they would rent out a bedroom, or a lot of the times, some of the Airbnbs I've stayed at, they were their actual apartments, and when somebody booked it, they would go stay with a friend. Like they would just give up their whole apartment just to have some kind of help in paying their rent. When these corporations found out just how fucking lucrative that shit was, they started buying more properties solely to mass rent them on fucking Airbnb, like whole fucking buildings.
And that's what I was talking about.
Yeah, by corporations for fucking Airbnb. Like, and then what fucks me up with that is you got this whole corporation renting out this building, right? And these motherfuckers still got the fucking nerve to charge you $200 on a fucking cleaning fee. Like, they don't already have an entire ass fucking company that goes through and cleans these vacant apartments anyway. Like, they don't have whole fucking companies that don't go through and clean fucking office buildings and shit anyway. They're still going to charge you $200 to fucking for a cleaning fee on that Airbnb. Just saying.
And now we come to today. So you've got these multinational corporations that have reduced the housing market down to less than half of what it was.
Right.
We have a record low 1.5 million homes as of last month on the market. Like, we haven't got the numbers in for June because they come in usually at the end of the month. But we have a record low 1.5 million homes on the market. And what's hilarious is we've got these mass bidding wars in a lot of cities where houses are going for $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 less than what they are, like, or more than what they're valued at currently, what they're paying taxes on, what their asking prices are, because buyers are having to fight their asses off in order to get in, and because a lot of these buyers are companies that are happy to throw that money out there because the stock market, we forgot one other thing, which was COVID, Donald Trump, and the stock market. The stock market's additional crash during COVID made it so that the stock market became an even less safe place for them to park their money. And they don't have any of these exciting new financial products to stick their shit in either. Most of these multi-billionaires and multi-billion-dollar companies, they're not looking to be angel investors for small businesses and whatever, and the market's being fucked and all that. So what do they want to do? Well, here's the thing. Talking a little bit about economics, there are supposedly, if you get very, very, very basic Econ 101, there are two kinds of markets. Elastic demand markets. These are things like, say, a particular fiction book or something like that. The amount of demand for that product can be influenced by advertising and other things. And inelastic demands. These are generally things that are like fuel, housing, etc. It takes a massive shift in the market in some way, like a population boom or something like that, to change the demand for these products. What's going on with this is that housing has traditionally been considered an inelastic market. There's only so many people who are going to be looking for housing at any given time. But starting to treat properties like investments, because land itself, space itself, especially with population growth being what it's been, is becoming more and more lucrative, but also more importantly, more and more stable. So you have people moving out of their houses into new houses, holding onto their own houses in the hopes that the empty home will net them more money. You have buildings like being parked in by multinationals that are holding on to them solely for their supposed value that they can keep writing off their taxes, and you have landlords that are holding on to empty units in the hopes that they can attract more and more expensive clientele rather than trying to rent them out at the lowest common denominator because they don't want to take the risk of potentially dealing with a tenant trashing them or whatever else at the actual market value of the property.
That was our last slot. So whoever wants, I'm going to keep it on red. Whoever wants to throw up some, throw it up. But I'm going to tell y'all where this started. With New York, there was a company called the Blackstone Group. The Blackstone Group initially marketed themselves as, let me pull up their website. It's an American alternative investment management company investing capital on behalf of pension funds, large institutions, and individuals. Ooh, right? So, what happened? Blackstone is headquartered on Park Avenue, New York. Blackstone was one of the very first companies that started buying up land in New York, right? And when the banks, they were doing pretty well. They were testing it there. They started testing it out in LA. But when the banks went bust and these pension funds couldn't be paid out anymore and they started losing money, this is when they started to buy up properties. They started buying up the foreclosed properties, knowing they had the money for that, so that they could backfill their investment that they're losing on these pension funds from these banks. Blackstone today is the largest owner of residential properties in America. They have now infiltrated through big cities. They are now in small towns. They are in towns of Tennessee that have 800 people in them. They own at least a third to half of some of the markets in unincorporated towns in the South U.S. 1/3 to 1/2.
So now we get to the portion of the show where we talk solutions, because I have a buddy who works in evictions, and I've actually talked to him pretty extensively about this. One of the biggest things that he has proposed is the idea of potentially levying high taxes by state and local municipalities, especially on any unit
real
that
quick,
remains...
I just want to address Cat Rose. Their headquarters is in Park Avenue, New York. However, they are a quote-unquote multinational company in literally every continent except for Antarctica. They have offices in Africa. They are everywhere. They are all over the United States. They are regulating the market in Asia. They're everywhere. Europe, they're everywhere. They are the leading global investment firm on residential properties to this day.
Well, and one of the big solutions that he has talked about, given that he dealt with these evictions and with Blackstone actually pretty heavily, considering they were always hovering at the edge if he couldn't, his job was to broker the deals with the property owners that helped them keep their properties, or to start the process of the eviction, one or the other. He was the intermediary between several big banks, primarily Wells Fargo, but several different big banks were clientele of the company he worked for. And he was a victim advocate until he wasn't, basically. His job was to make sure that either they could pay or that the process got started for the eviction itself. And one of the big things that he said over and over was he saw, especially with landlords, over and over and over again, they would sit on properties waiting for the price to go higher. And one of the big things that he in particular thought might change that was levying heavy taxes, like high percentages, on any property that remains vacant for longer than a set period of time, say 3 to 4 months, without a family either renting it or living in it full time.
And I want to give you...
So that it becomes a far less lucrative investment for people to just park their fucking money there, because property taxes, even in the highest areas like out here where damn near everything's paid for, are still not high enough to actually make a dent in these motherfuckers' markets. We're talking tax penalties of up to 20% every month until it gets filled.
I want to give the audience just an overview of the reach of Blackstone. Now, Blackstone really kind of hit it big in 2005 when they started leveraging buyouts. Some of their most notable ones, they acquired Denmark Communications, which at the time was a telecom monopoly in Denmark. They took that. Let's see here. At the time of its announcement, the EQ office buyout became the largest in history, surpassing the buyout of Hospital Corporation of America in 2006. Hospital Corporation of America runs 99% of the hospitals in the country, minus some of the Catholic ones. What else? They acquired Michaels Arts and Crafts. They with the Carlisle, and they work with Bain Capital, the Carlisle Group, Lion Capital. They acquired Cadbury Schweppes, Cadbury Cream Eggs and Schweppes Ginger Ale. What else do we have here? Let's see. Motel 6, Biomet. What else do they own?
David, the
Vivint.
answer... I wanted to answer David's question really quick. The higher property taxes would only apply if you have an empty property, meaning you bought a house in addition to the one you live in or the apartment you live in, and you are not living there on purpose for upwards of, again, the suggestion he made was 3 to 4 months. So we're not talking about the average fucking person here. We're talking about somebody who's got enough money to own a second home and just not do anything with it.
Allie, I sent you a link if you want to put that in the chat. That is a literal list of every fucking company that Blackstone.
In other words, if you live in your house, you would not be affected by this policy because you live in your fucking house.
Right. But this policy and the fact that they're raising property taxes in the area does affect your house because now your property taxes are being raised. And yes, higher property taxes do bring some benefits. A lot of places pay for their education systems by the property tax. So it does help in that aspect.
Everybody does.
Right. It does help in that aspect.
We got red from Makeda again.
Oh, fuck it. We'll just keep it there. So it does help in that aspect. However, if you're on an adjustable rate mortgage and I want to say the highest one that I've ever seen was 16.9%. I have watched somebody's mortgage jump to 16.9%.
They went as high as 25% up here. There were news articles on that.
I'm just saying, me personally, the highest that I've seen somebody had to pay was 16.9. And then they start buying up these properties. So now you got a 16.9% mortgage on top of your fucking property taxes literally tripling in a fucking year. Tripling in a year. When I tell y'all, wait, what's the average property tax in New York City right now? Because I'm going to tell you it's a lot fucking higher than when I lived there. Average property tax in New York City. Do we have like an actual fucking rate? What the fuck?
It depends. It depends on what neighborhood you live in.
No, it doesn't.
Out here it does.
No, fucking... No. What? Sorry, I put in the wrong year, because I'm not.
But, like, so to explain to you guys a little further, I'm not talking about raising property taxes for everybody. What I'm talking about is a specific tax that gets levied only if a property remains unoccupied by anybody. So if you're a landlord and you rent it out, you're not going to get hit by this. If you're if you're a family and you live in your home, you're not going to get hit by this. If you live in an apartment, you'll never get hit by this. If you're a landlord and you own an apartment that's fucking empty, or if you are a family that owns a second home and you just leave it empty, nobody in your family lives there, nobody lives there at all. This is not people who bought houses for their mom and let them live there and pay off their mortgage. There's somebody living there. These are for empty fucking homes,
right? So
and empty
Manhattan.
Apartments. That's what this policy would apply to. This is my friends proposed this idea that a special property tax in excess of, say, 10 to 15% would get levied on that property for however percentage amount of time it remains unoccupied after 3 to 4 months, which is a reasonable amount of time for a landlord to fix up an apartment or a house or to renovate it. Because let's say you have to move out of your house for a month or two to, say, get work done or something. That's not going to hit you either. You still live there. That's still your primary residence. You just might have to be in a hotel for a month or two while your shit gets done, right? Like, that's not going to hit you either. This is specifically people who are investing in property and parking their money there with no butts. No butts are on this property.
The average property tax in New York City goes anywhere from $5,000 to $12,000 a year now. How many of y'all paying that much? Homeowners. How many of y'all are paying between $5,000 and $12,000 a year in property tax?
I am.
You got hit by that bubble. This is what happens. Carbuckle, we need a color.
Okay, I'll put it to you this. I'll put it to you this way. I pay about $1,700 a month in mortgage right now. $300 of that goes to my principal. The rest is fucking escrow, and of that, almost $1,000 per month is property tax.
Oh, hold on. Hitting things I shouldn't be hitting. But it wasn't
for those of you who don't know how escrow works, escrow packages up like your mortgage insurance and other shit
like
together.
My property taxes are $4,000 a year. When I talk about property taxes in New York City being $5,000 a year, I'm talking about places most people won't live. I'm talking about like places where I grew up, where people would look at these neighborhoods and say no. And the only time that these neighborhoods got revitalized was when corporations decided to revitalize, quote unquote, is when corporations.
What color do you want?
He already said red. Is when corporations decided to come in and take the entire fucking culture out of the neighborhood and are now whitewashing fucking everything. So that $5,000 a year property tax, that shit is going to be, because of the fact that they're commercializing it so much, I wouldn't be surprised if I see $12,000 to $16,000 in property taxes a year from these neighborhoods now.
Well, and Jen, I'm kind of a unique case also. Because my property was worth $275,000 when we bought it. We got it on short sale for $215,000. It's now valued at close to $450,000. So like it's doubled in 10 years. But also, Washington State, fun fact for those of you who don't live here, we do not have state income tax. Everything is funded with property and sales taxes. Everything.
Scove the Wanderer, yes. Won't the renters that do exist under those people get hit with the cost of that tax? That's exactly what's going to happen. That's exactly what's going to happen. That's exactly what is happening. They wind up raising the rents to cover these ridiculously high mortgages and the rising property tax.
But the problem with the policy that we're proposing is that would partially help to stop that from happening, because people who would just sit on these properties would now be forced to allow people to move in rather than sit and wait for the higher rent that they think is going to happen. That's kind of what the proposal is about. Basically making the taxes high enough that sitting and waiting is not tenable for these people.
So here's a good example of how hard.
I mean, I'm of the opinion that nobody on earth needs a vacation home, but that's just me.
Right. Murray Hill, which is Midtown, it's a nice neighborhood. It's central to shit. It's nice. Murray Hill is pretty nice. Kips Bay, it's pretty nice. It's in Manhattan. You're accessible to transportation. You're not too far from the water. The amount of housing vacant is 22%. 22%. Now, I know that sounds like a low number, but when you think about it, these aren't houses. These are multi-unit buildings. 22% in a neighborhood that is no more than 10 blocks, 10 city blocks. 22% of their housing is vacant. 10 to 20 blocks, so you figure 2 miles, 1 to 2 miles of a neighborhood. 22%.
So you're assuming that rent costs would be raised immediately after this policy went into place. There are protections, at least in my state, against that. There are all kinds of laws that actually protect tenants in my state. So at least here, this is where the proposal was put forward, was the idea for here, because there are extremely strong tenants laws in Washington State.
Here, they're not. They can only raise your rent by a certain percent every year. Excuse me. Down here. But we really don't have a lot of protections. When it came to New York, the one thing that these corporations hated was that they had rent-controlled apartments. Y'all, when everyone was hunting for a rent-controlled apartment for as long as I can remember. What is a rent-controlled apartment? Usually these apartments were given in like the 40s to the 70s. And in the lease, it would say, we can't raise your rent. This is going to be your rent fucking forever. Forever. So if somebody was paying $450 a month in 1960, it doesn't matter. They can't have their rent raised. It's in their fucking lease that for however long they live there, however long they renew the fucking lease, they get rent controlled, right? So what these families would do is they would pass on the apartment generation to generation to generation so that the same lease and the same stipulations applied. So what these fucking corporations wound up doing, and Donald Trump was notorious for this, what they would wind up doing is like turning the heat off in the building during the winter. They would, if somebody would move out, they would move in, like they would make it like a halfway house to put like recently released criminals, now recently released convicts. I believe everyone needs a chance, so I'm not judging on that. But when these neighborhoods were located on the Upper East Side, on the Upper West Side, very fucking rich neighborhoods. So these people were not fucking having that shit. They put in people that were going through rehab into these. They would leave trash in the hallway so that they had bug infestations and not take care of these infestations to force these people out of these rent controlled apartments. And then when they got them out, they would then renovate them and say they were paying $450 a month, right? For a one bedroom.
Sorry, give me a second. For some reason it's like restarting instead of actually stopping.
That one bedroom right now goes for $3,000 a month.
So here's for all of you guys that are fear-mongering right now about what tax proposals, like what I talked about, would do. What the fuck is happening right now with nothing? Like, y'all are saying, oh, the rent rates would go up. Rent rates are already fucking
It's already happening.
Like, the most that this would do is make it a fuck of a lot harder for slumlords to just sit forever on their, their incredibly expensive apartments and not fill them.
I don't think y'all understand. There is not a city in America, not a major city, not a fucking unincorporated township, not a city in fucking America that you can afford rent on a one-bedroom apartment on minimum wage. There is not one city in America that you can. Not one. In fact, for the majority of the country who will still abide by the federal minimum wage, you have to make anywhere from $5 to $10 more an hour to afford the rent in that place.
Carbuncle, if there are any exceptions, then rich people will exploit them and find a way. Like, unfortunately, that's one of those things where at that point, people are just going to have to either be able to pay the taxes, or you only need one single home, one or the other. Unfortunately, as much as there are exceptions for owning multiple homes,
I'm for owning multiple homes, but you have to show that they have to be occupied at least some point in the year by somebody. I'm for multiple homes. I don't think that somebody should be buying out whole fucking blocks of a city. That shit's fucking excessive. I believe in I don't believe in corporations owning multiple homes. I am fine with individuals owning multiple homes. Because even then, even with individuals, so where corporations will let these sit, and they've studied this, like when it comes down to personal landlords, individual landlords that do buy up a couple of properties, they actually are renting them out. And they've actually found that a private landlord, as opposed to a corporation, is more willing to work with people who are falling behind on their rent. They are more they're more at chance of taking Section 8. They are more at chance of taking like rental assistance for these people. It's these larger corporations that are not doing this, and it's these larger corporations that are sitting on these fucking empty properties.
So, Seraphim, I'm going to keep reminding you, they are already raising rents. The rents that are extremely high right now are high because they can sit on these properties and leave them empty.
And this is what we're getting to. I'm not seeing that comment. Can you highlight that for me, please? I'm not seeing that.
Landlords will use any excuse to raise rents.
But here's the thing, Seraphim.
This is what's going on in the chat. Is people are like, well, it's just going to raise the rents. It's just going to raise the rents. It's policy.
Actually, no. That's the thing. That's the thing. If we take corporate out of property ownership, this will actually lower the fucking rents. Because what happens is, like I said, and some of y'all must have missed the first half of this fucking show when I explained this shit to you. This shit is done to entice billion-dollar fucking businesses to move in and pay the city. They do this shit to make it all fucking pretty so places like Walmart, like Amazon, like fucking can move in. So what do? They jack up the fucking property tax so that they let these corporations buy these fucking places, have them sit fucking vacant. So now we've all been told supply and demand, right? We all fucking learned that shit, right? What they do is they buy up a whole bunch of that shit. When 22% of a property in 2 miles goes vacant, what do you think happens to the price of the shit that they are renting out? It skyrockets. So then they fucking turn around and say, well, we can charge this much, which means we can fucking charge a higher property tax because we have more high value fucking properties in this area. And then they turn around and pay that fucking property tax and improve the fucking schools. So what do they say? Oh, big fucking corporation. Look at this shit. And Walmart is known to fucking do this shit. Walmart did this shit to a town in fucking out in Alabama. They look at fucking Walmart and said, fucking look at this shit. We got great fucking schools. We've got all this fucking pretty shit here. Wouldn't this be a beautiful place to come fucking bring your corporation? So what did Walmart do? They did this shit to a small fucking town in Alabama. Walmart says, oh, look, they're making it all pretty. This is a great fucking place to bring our investors, to bring people that want to partner with us, all of that shit. So they took over the small fucking town in Alabama. Walmart then turned around and bought these apartments and these houses from these corporations that had bought them and left them vacant. Why did they do that? So that they in turn can leave them vacant, unless they wanted to sit there and bring somebody from overseas or bring somebody from another city and say, hey, come sit in this town and look how fucking beautiful this is. And then they sit and let that shit go vacant. This is the shit that happened in New York. They had these big ass investment firms come and buy these fucking properties. This in turn enticed the fucking banks to come in. These banks then bought up those fucking properties, left those fucking vacant, except for, when the CEO wants a fucking side piece, or he wants to bring in another investor from another fucking company and say, hey, we'll put you up with room and board. Meanwhile, these fucking properties are just sitting there. They're just fucking sitting there.
And at the very least, cities and states should be able to make fucking bank off of those companies that are going to be just sitting there. If we're not going to get regulations to stop them from doing it, and we're not, like that's a pipe dream. For all of you who are like, abolish private property, at present, that is also a pipe dream. I completely agree with you. Abolish private property. This is one place where Jen and I differ, at least in slight. But
I'm okay with private property. I'm fine with private property. The where I come in, where my beef with that is, I believe that property taxes should not be going back into the pockets of the politicians that are running these areas and that are running the neighborhoods, that are running the states. I believe that the property tax needs to be redistributed to schools, needs to be redistributed to infrastructure, needs to be redistributed into welfare and state programs to take care of its citizens, not to take care of its politicians. I'm fine with private property as long as that fucking money is going back into the fucking neighborhood. Well, the reason why I'm not good with this is because all the selling that's being done, the back and forth is being done between investment banks and fucking private corporations. All of this property tax, let me tell y'all something. When you walk into the Upper East Side, when you walk into the Upper West Side, these people ain't sending their kids to public school. They ain't sending their fucking kids to public school. They're sending their kids to fucking private school. And when you start bringing these people down to Tribeca, when you start bringing these people down to the LES, when you start bringing these people down to Battery and up to the Bronx and out in Jamaica, they ain't sending their kids to public school either. They're sending their kids to private school because now they can afford
Lizzie,
those fucking...
What color would you like?
Yeah.
We still got a couple. Like, the thing went off. I don't know if you heard it, but...
So, they ain't sending their kids to public school either. So, there's no fucking incentive. So, you got this fucking neighborhood of fucking hens, right, that have now moved into Jamaica, which is blue. So, which is where I grew up. I grew up in Jamaica. And that's starting to now be gentrified. So, you got all these fucking little hens, right, that are moving in. They're not sending their fucking kids to the fucking public schools. They're not sending the kids to the schools that I went to. So, what happened? What the fuck happened in my neighborhood? They closed down my junior high school. My junior high school doesn't exist anymore. It's a fucking private school now. The city had no fucking reason to keep the school open anymore because attendance was going down to the point that they had no fucking kids going because all these fucking rich families started to move in and they started sending their kids to private school.
Seraphim, okay, so let's explain for the fourth time what the point of this policy would be. The point of this policy would be to apply a devastating tax to anybody that sits on a large number or even just a certain number of vacant properties that have been zoned as individual family units, whether this is apartments for a landlord or whether this is houses for an individual. There could potentially be a, caveat for, say, having two homes or something. My friend did not go into that. The idea would be to make it untenable for a landlord to raise the rates so high that they could not easily replace a tenant within a certain period of time. Because as you guys have all echoed, you all have talked about like landlords raising your rent to be so high they could not fill the apartment for months and months on end. Mm-hmm. This policy would make it not profitable for them to do that. They would make more money renting it for a lower rate than they would if they waited for a long time and had to pay this devastating tax. That is the whole
But
point
there
of
has
this
to be a
policy.
clause, though. There has to be a clause in that, because what they can say and what they have been saying, because there have been crackdowns on this, and this happened in New York City. What they said was they were like, yo, we're going to start forcing you to fucking, why is that on Ultramarine? Sorry. We're going to start forcing you to.
David, we did do a whole stream on education, actually, not too long ago.
What they said was that we're going to start forcing you to fill these. So what they would do, oh, come and have a business meeting with us. We're going to put you on one of these properties. So what they're saying is that, oh, they are being used to house people under corporate management. They're being used to house people to further our business.
Well, and the whole point at that point then is this a hotel, or are they actually residing there? Because when it comes to residential homes and condos, that's what that regulation would be.
To address Seraphim real quick. If you wind up taxing the fuck out of these motherfuckers to where they figure out it's more profitable to just rent this shit, that is actually going to lower your property tax. Because you don't have these vacant places sitting there driving up the fucking rents that are driving up the, oh, look how fucking pretty my shit is. So your property taxes actually become lower. And then there's a thing, I don't know if you did not learn about supply and demand in elementary school. When the supply lessens, when the supply grows, the prices drop. When they have an overabundance of something, they lower the prices to get rid of the overflow. So your rent will actually decrease because there's an overabundance. There's a fucking competitive market that people can sit here and say, okay, I just looked at this apartment and it's nice, but there's an apartment by another fucking corporation or owner or whatever the fuck 2 blocks down that gives me 1,000 more square feet for the same price. So I'm going to go rent that.
Well, and the entire point of this idea is that if they have a certain number of months to make sure that it is occupied full-time by a person, not being used like a hotel like what you're talking about, but actually occupied on a rental agreement, let's say 6 months, or that somebody's living there full-time and you can prove that they're getting mail there, etc.
I know, I'm even for fucking corporations having some apartments like that. However, you can't pay a fucking year in advance. You gotta pay monthly like the rest of the tenants in that fucking building. You can't pay a fucking year in advance and just block these out, these out, these out. You can't pay a year in advance. You gotta pay fucking monthly. And there has to be, you have to have somebody residing 2, 6, 4 months, 8 months out of the year, whatever. And if you're at a 2-month rate, then we're going to raise the fucking tax on you. If you're at a 4-month rate, then we'll lower it a little bit. If you got somebody living there for 6 months, then we'll lower that tax rate on you a little bit too.
If you got somebody living there for a year or longer lease, well, at that point, you've got a little bit more.
It's no longer applicable to you.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And so, that basically, that would help stop landlords from doing the 6-month, month-to-month leases, etc., where they hike your rate every single month, that kind of shit. It would also, again, put the pressure on the landlord. If they have a vacant unit, let's say this vacant unit's been on the market for 2 months, you're pushing up on that 4-month thing, they're likely to drop the rental rate on it because they're more desperate at this point to not pay that goddamn tax.
There's this fucking house in Atlanta, right?
Oh, okay. That was not very clear from the way you were phrasing it. We shouldn't let potential increases stop the policy of penalizing landlords for providing properties empty. Thank you for clarifying, Sarah. We weren't trying to rip your ass. We were just trying to explain what's going on with this idea because of the fact that a lot of people do get scared by these sorts of things, like, oh, the landlords are just going to do whatever.
Right.
But they're already doing whatever.
So
this is at least a stopgap that can get some more money. And hell, we could even, if this were proposed in a more progressive city, because, let's face it, we're the laboratories of democracy, right? People have called places like Seattle, San Francisco, etc., that we're kind of the laboratories of that shit. If it gets tried and it works in a place like this.
Can I just address Peach real quick? Peach, you've been going on about Baltimore being crime ridden and everything else. I grew up in New York City in the fucking 80s. All right, I don't want to hear about crime. They literally did this to New York City. They gentrified New York City, who went from the crack epidemic in the fucking 80s to what it is now. No fucking city is safe. I don't give a shit what your fucking crime rate is. I literally lived in a place where I have had a friend get his brains blown out on a fucking train for an 8-ball jacket. For a fucking jacket. It doesn't fucking matter. Does it lessen the crime? Yes. Because,
you know what else?
Because your police department is now being funded by these property taxes that are causing them to be militarized. So they are able to come in like the fucking army and start killing people.
Well, and on top of it, like, let's talk about what actually decreases crime more often than not. Stable housing, decent economic growth, a lot of those things.
Peach, let me ask you something. Are you fucking Miss Cleo? Yeah, they won't gentrify here. Are you Miss Cleo? Or are you unaware that there are sections of Baltimore that are already being gentrified? They've already started in Baltimore. This shit has already started. They're already testing the fucking waters in Baltimore. You're sitting here fucking mad ignorant right now. You're sitting here, I don't know what kind of clout you want to push out for this. But when you are dealing with somebody who has lived in Baltimore, still knows people in Baltimore, and your rents are already starting to increase in Baltimore, don't come here with falsified shit like who the fuck you are. Perhaps if you sat back and listened, you would be able to start seeing the signs of gentrification. You would be able to start seeing the signs of when a city is in trouble. Instead of sitting here having to fucking push whatever fucking Mad Hatter fucking up on my ass agenda you want to come here and spit.
Yeah, Peach is usually pretty cool. Let's let them actually talk a little bit. Like, let's let them figure out what they're doing. As far as talking about gentrification and policies like the ones that we're talking about here, this is the one thing that, at the very least...
Can you highlight Moto Kondo's Dare didn't help much?
Where is it?
Dare didn't help much.
Yeah, Dare didn't do shit.
So Dare told me exactly what drugs I wanted to do. I grew up in the Dare generation. Like they had like the cops come in and like WPIX 11 was up at my school and like doing all that shit.
Peach is saying that they see the gentrification that's going on in their own city. I think we missed something somewhere in that conversation.
And Peach literally said, "Okay, yeah, well they won't do that here." Like they're doing it.
Oh God, MUI, are you young enough to not know what Dare is?
So there was an anti-drug program that came up during the crack epidemic. It got really big during the crack epidemic, where it was, what the fuck did DARE stand for? I can't remember. But it was basically this whole push. It was part of the war on drugs. War on drugs.
Oh God, it still exists.
Yeah, it still exists. It was part of the war on drugs where they would send this fucking dog to your school. He looked like a fucking cracked out version of Marmaduke for some reason, right? Maybe that was just my neighborhood. But they would send this fucking dog.
Drug abuse resistance education program.
Yes! They would send this fucking person in a dog suit to your fucking school, right? And they would tell you all the fucking horrors about drugs. And this is where I remember this is where check your child's candy because they may sneak drugs into the candy came in. And it's like, Dare led me to believe that more people were going to offer me drugs for free than they ever fucking did in my life. And I have a good set of tits. I have a good set of tits, and I still have not been offered free fucking drugs the way that Dare fucking told me they were going to be.
Well, part of the problem also is that Dare also lied about how incredibly, like, they made fucking pot look dangerous, so when people smoked pot and they were fine, the stuff that was actually true about some of the harder shit, like people just ignored it. Ikeda, we are back to red.
We had
there is no one to the problem with the war on drugs is there's no one to surrender to. Ha!
Yeah,
the only people that the war on drugs benefited were the cartels.
Right. And the cops. we had a notoriously bad crack problem when I was growing up, and the way that there would come in would be like, if you start smoking weed, you're going to start smoking crack. So now, mind you, we're 7 to 12 years old, right? And we've known what crackheads were from the time I knew what a crackhead was. I knew what a crackhead looked like. I knew what a crackhead acted like by the time I was 5. So you got these young ass kids, right, who are seeing these cracked out motherfuckers, straight crackheads, every day of their life, acting like crackheads. And they're like, if you smoke weed, you're going to wind up doing that. And it's like, and I'm like, yo, if I'm high as fuck on weed, I don't want to feel like that. I am quite happy. The only fucking thing weed led me to was fucking turkey sandwiches. Just saying. And bowls of fucking Cookie Crisps. Apparently, I was not going to go find somebody high on the shit.
Apparently, that quote from Makeda came from a buddy of his in the '60s. So let's go back. Let's talk a little bit. Let's go back a little bit to talking about the housing market and shit, and like other policies. There are other things that can be done. Limitations on how much property that is not within a business purview that a particular company can own. Limitations on foreign buyers in the United States and how much property they are allowed to own as individuals and as corporations. Which you'd think that those sorts of things might affect commercial stuff, but this is where zoning laws come in. If you have a company that cannot prove it has a business interest outside of parking its money in an apartment, like, regulation and stuff, going through all of the bureaucracy to prove that it's okay, then having regulations around what kind of property businesses that are especially foreign investors can own, how much of that can, like, how much of their ownership of those sorts of things can be in the United States in terms of, like, how much money they have here. Those sorts of things don't sound like they'd be all that helpful. But if it's implemented properly, if it's implemented properly, regulations like that, in addition to regulations like the one that I talked about, where empty additional properties over a certain threshold that stay empty for a certain amount of time, or that have as Jen proposed, the alternative to, you only have 4, 6, 8 month leases, that kind of thing, levying additional property taxes on those so that you encourage landlords to lower their rent rates for longer term leases.
Can I just
will help make housing a lot more secure for everyone.
The manic real quick. Kids who use drugs have parents who use drugs. That's actually been statistically proven to be not true. It's actually been proven that children who grow up with, and I'm not talking about fucking weed, because
I mean, I grew up with
alcohol is worse than fucking weed, you know what I mean? But when it comes to,
I grew up with parents who were addicts, and I never touched the stuff because of it.
Right. That, what happens is when you start having like the Greenwich bitches that nobody expects to be high on fucking Valium all day, or high on fucking heroin, or fucking snorting fucking bags and fucking kilos of coke all fucking week.
Oh, apparently Manic was mocking commercial.
Oh, okay. I was like, oh, all right. I was like, yo, no. Like, you know what, honestly, I've seen the biggest fucking issue with drugs come out of? Bored fucking teenagers. Bored motherfucking teenagers. When you don't have the resources for kids to just go out and do something, they're gonna find something to do.
Well, plus, especially the poorest among us, people think that poverty is a predictor of drug use. It's actually kind of the opposite.
Yeah.
The people who sell don't tend to use their own supply because they can't afford to. Most of them will say don't get into that because you get
it's also the fact of, if you start fucking with your own shit, you run the risk of getting addicted to your own shit, and then you're fucked. Like, I've known a lot of hustlers in my day, and I've known a lot of heroin hustlers, and I've known a lot of crack hustlers, and they were like, I will never do that because that's what happens to people, and if that happens to me, I'm gonna fuck my own supply.
Lizzie, this might actually be a thing. Jen, you and I should chat about potentially adding a sort of ting at the beginning.
Please ping sarcasm, because y'all know I get crazy.
Yeah, we should talk about, in our little intro bit at the beginning, we should talk about potentially adding a, hey, if you're being a sarcastic fuck, please use /s to let us know. That way we don't pop off on you for a dumb take that it's just you joking.
Generalissimo, I kind of don't want to touch on that here because not everybody believes in the same gods. So we shouldn't present, you can highlight that if you want to. We shouldn't present this as being an affront to a god, because then people, they can turn around and say, well, I don't believe in those gods, so why should I have to worry about offending them?
Well, yeah, and this is an allyship show. Like this show, I will cover stuff if you guys ask me to. And the answer is, you are actually right. Like, from my perspective as a Hellenist, absolutely, that is actually wrong. It's a front to Hermes too, because fairness in the markets is a big thing for him. But again, we're talking about primarily, this show generally is fairly secular. We talk about religious things from time to time, but we talk about them.
I'd say more pluralistic than secular.
Yeah, this show is an allyship show. So we talk across faiths, and we talk about issues that affect everybody. We started off as an atheist and polytheist allyship show, but after we had a Christian on who was not a militant converting type Christian, who was actually an Episcopalian, who was pretty damn chill and very supportive of science and other things. The whole point of the coalition is to come across between faiths, beyond faiths, and talk about issues that affect everybody.
Right, and then plus, how, Ain't y'all fucking tired of hearing the same old atheist shit all the time?
Mm-hmm.
Ain't y'all tired of that shit? I'm tired of
Yeah,
that shit.
so if you wrote /s rent totally needs to be higher, everybody would do, like, that means that we know you're being sarcastic.
Yeah,
If y'all
right.
do that, we can start adding that to our intro bit if you guys
But
would
yeah,
like.
what,
Let us know in the comments if you'd like us to do that.
my solution to this, y'all want to have corporations own property, that's fine. I think that's me. I think that's some asshole outside my window. But we're gonna flip this a bit. I think that corporations should be allowed to buy property after private owners have had the chance for it. If you cannot say, and I want to give it a year, I want to give, if this property can't sell to a private owner within a year, then you could put it on auction.
On top of the extremely high taxes for it being not having been sold in that amount of time.
Right. Well, no.
Because otherwise people will just hold out with extremely high things and we'll still have the same problem we have. It'll just be delayed a year.
But they have to go to auction for it. I want them to have it be treated like a foreclosure.
But we're having
the roles reversed.
But here's the problem: we are having that happen right now, just with properties that are for sale right now. Like here in Seattle, damn near every fucking property is going up for like option and bidding wars and shit.
But the reason why they're coming up for that is because a corporation don't want to buy it.
No, they're actually corporations are outbidding people with upwards of $300,000 to $500,000.
Well, no, we got to separate that. Corporations are not allowed to bid against private owners, for one. That's how it should be. They should not be allowed to be coming into the same market to bid on a property as private owners. You can give it 6 months to a year. If no private owner has the incentive to buy this property, but there has to be regulations put into place too. If you are selling a property, before it's allowed to go on the market, it needs to be shown that it has been renovated or that you have a company in place after your appraisal to have things renovated for the homeowner. This needs to be whoever's going to buy the house. This needs to be laid out before you should be allowed to fucking sell a house. This way they don't sit there with fucking, falling apart properties that ain't nobody going to fucking buy. Before you buy a house, it needs to be shown that it's in livable condition. Some people like to flip houses. That's fine. Whatever. But you have to state this has to be sold as is. And I want longer penalties on that. I want a 2-year on an as-is house so that it can go to somebody, a private buyer. 1 to 2 years, and then instead of having people bid on the foreclosure, have the corporations bid on the foreclosure. Let's not give them priority. That's how I see that.
So we've got Big Marty asking about the channel. So my channel overall is a Hellenist channel. This show is a pluralist show. We've got Big Marty DIC says, I'm new to the channel. What do you guys talk about? On this show, we talk about secular political stuff that affects everybody. Yeah. On my general channel, it's a pagan channel. I talk about a mix of pagan stuff, Hellenist-specific stuff, praxis, lots of politics. Occasionally, I'll get my hands dirty in the community, like generally for allyship. But most of the time, the majority of it is education. That's what we talk about. Last week, I had my buddy Cyrus the Skeptic on as a co-host to talk about what's been going on in Canada with the bodies that they've been finding for kids and stuff. But that's mostly what we talk about. So, we're getting pretty close to the end of the show. Do you have any final thoughts, Jen? Because we don't have any more slots, so we don't have any more concerns. So we're getting to the wrap-up and show portion.
I am done with, in general, private corporations having the priority over citizens. I think that we need a big, long overhaul, not only in the housing market, to put private citizens as the priority, but in general. I am a democratic socialist. Capitalism needs to be regulated by welfare, but welfare should be the stronger end above capitalism. What can we do? This is a really hard one because people need places to live. So it's not like we can boycott the fucking housing market, right? We can't do that. We can't fucking do that shit. And now with the price of fucking lumber, it's not even like you can pick a fucking house and go fucking build that shit at this point. This is the time when you start looking at constituents, when you start looking at representatives, not just a fucking president or a fucking senator, but when you start looking at like local hometown constituents, when you start looking at congressmen and shit like that, start asking about what their plans on for the housing market to alleviate the stress on the housing market. Start looking at their donors. If you start noticing that they are being backed by hedge funds, if they are being backed by investment firms, if they are being backed by real estate firms, that motherfucker's not gonna do shit to help you out when it comes to the cost of living. I'm good.
For me, I think I have a tendency to be in favor of let's regulate until culture shifts. Basically, like legislating morality to a certain extent, even tiny steps are going to get us a little bit closer to the goal. A lot of people are like, hey, revolution, everything needs to change at once. That's not practical to a certain extent. I'm very pragmatist in that way. I think that policies like the ones that we described earlier, potentially putting a delay on things, in addition to the kind of taxes and stuff that I was talking about for properties that are left vacant for long periods of time, will heavily discourage the sorts of people that are currently taking advantage of these things from continuing to be able to. Especially that corporation can't have that many buddies overseas that they can put up in that many different rental units. Like, that if you can prove that just because you got one of them doesn't mean the other 50 can get filled by a buddy you've got flying in. So, in my point of view, at least, that's the hope, is that those things can actually change. That we can start incentivizing corporations to stop purchasing so goddamn much, but also incentivize landlords to stop sitting on their shit.
I think we need a king. Are you out of your fucking mind?
But, so, as far as wrapping up for tonight, Jen, what do you got going on?
I am fucking mad.
Your channel is in the description. I'm gonna put it in the live chat as well with a slight delay.
Yeah, I am fucking mad about the.
You recorded something right before the show, didn't you?
I haven't yet. I'm doing that tonight, actually.
Damn it, Jen! Here
life got in the way.
I had some faith in you. I was trying to give you some credit. And
life got in the fucking way, but I am pretty fucking mad about this Derek Chauvin sentence.
Oh, we got Neil in the chat.
Hey, Neil. I'm pretty fucking mad about it. So I'm gonna get more into why, and I'm gonna break down.
What are you mad about?
Why? I don't think it was enough. I don't think it was enough. And I'm gonna warn y'all. This is gonna be a video coming from somebody who has lost 2 people to the hands of police officers. So I'm fucking mad, and I'm gonna break down how, yes, even though this is something, this is still wildly imbalanced, especially when it comes down to how white cops are sentenced versus black men are sentenced. And I'm going to break down Minnesota law, and I'm going to break down how this judge came about 22 and a half years. And just how many nonviolent offenses that are disproportionately black men have higher sentences than what Derek Chauvin had that time. So this one's going to be fucking angry. That's coming out tomorrow.
Well, this week...
There's a cat. Oh, yeah, he's still there. Okay. I didn't even realize he was there. He's actually quiet. I was like, there's a cat.
So, as many of you know, tragedy struck our community a little bit. There was a kind of a lot of shock. I'm not even sure if tragedy is the best way to describe it. We found out that somebody that quite a few of us were close to wasn't who they said they were. And because of that, I took last week off. Between that and shit going on with my cat, she's been in and out of the hospital. We've been trying to figure out what the hell's causing her asthma. And, we lost one of my rats recently. And there's, like, those of you who were on the Discord saw that my rat cages broke randomly. And we're trying to make sure that the boys didn't get injured because, like, one of them got crushed under the weight of the lid after the legs broke off the larger cage that the smaller one was resting on. So I ended up taking last week off. But this week, I'm going to be recording the script that I wrote for last week because I just couldn't get myself to be able to perform the way that I normally would. I'm going to be talking about how there's a lot of pagans especially that want to be favored by the gods, who dream of sort of living a hero's life and having this incredibly intimate relationship with the gods. And I'm going to be going over why, at least in Hellenic myth, that kind of sucks ass. And you really shouldn't want it. So we're going to be talking a bit about what justice looks like in Hellenic myth, why suffering and tragedy are essential to most heroes' stories, which I've covered a little bit before, but this is kind of going to be a continuation of the hero video, and how it's okay to be favored by the gods without necessarily being beloved by them, and what the difference between those two things are for Hellenists. So,
thank you, by the way, Akeda. Thank you.
Thank you, Akeda. So for those of you who are interested in those sorts of topics, make sure you hit the subscribe button, hit the like if you get a chance. We've had around 70 people watching. There's only 43 likes currently on my screen. That actually really helps with engagement. If you guys want us to start adding the /s sarcasm disclaimer to the intro bit that we do for every show, let me know in the comments, not the live chat. I start getting
mad for no ass reason.
Yeah, let me know in the comments, not the live chat, so I can actually track how many of you guys want that.
Yeah, because the comments are mad for no ass fucking reason.
The comments stick around, the live chat does not. Sometimes YouTube deletes it even if I don't fuck with the videos, so we might as well have you guys wait until the video ends. If you guys are watching it on the VOD, then obviously you can go down to the comments at any time and let me know. But let us know if you want that as a change. Let us know also what kind of topics you guys are interested in. Jen and I have a couple more that we've got planned out. We've got a few more topics. Mm-hmm. But it's always good to see what you guys are interested in. It'd be really, really helpful. Let us know what kind of gentrification stuff you've been dealing with in your towns. Just talk to us, especially if you guys are watching on the VOD. We read the comments. Jen actually goes and reads the comments, and if she doesn't, then I make her read them.
I do. I tend to look after the comments. Fuck, I dropped my pencil. I tend to read the comments over coffee in the morning. Because, best part of waking up is getting pissed off my internet trolls.
Yeah, and Jen and I really do enjoy your guys' feedback. Often, if you guys join the Discord, which is in the description, once you get past the gatehouse, because there is a holding area where everybody gets to hang out. My mod team has to get to know you before you get in. Once you get past
there, you're not a fucking asshole.
There are actually two different chats, one in the pagan circle and one in the atheist area, where you can ask me or Jen or both of us to respond to things you're interested in. Mm-hmm. I have responded to a few of those. Jen has responded to at least one of them. We've actually taken stuff out of that from topics. Patrons have let us know about things that have become topics. So if you guys are interested in engaging with us in that way, that is another option you have available to you. We're both pretty active on there. Jen pops in to just wreak havoc and destruction whenever she damn well feels like it.
Yeah, I come in to start trouble and then I leave.
But, I am in and out of the Discord pretty much constantly. I will appear and terrify people at random in any chat that I damn well please. It's a lot of fun. So, for those of you who are interested in that sort of thing, we have those options. There are ways to engage with us, to hang out. I close out the show the same way every time, as Jen and I have said. We built the coalition. Now let's fight. We're stronger together.
Thank you.
Have a good night, guys.